Wow, hot diggity damn, what a year it has been. Today I want to do a quick little update on the year that has been, the 2021 Cairns real estate market, and make a few predictions about heading into next year, 2022, and what we might likely see in the market in the Cairns region. First and foremost, I just want to say what an absolute cracking year it has been. For those clients that I've been able to assist along the way, I just wanted to say a big thank you to you. Without you, these videos wouldn't be possible. So thank you for your continued support throughout this year. But 2021 really was a year for the history books across Australia, and especially the Cairns property market. In real terms, we saw house prices increase on average about 20% across the board, and unit prices were a little bit slower, but we did see unit prices grow on average around the 10% mark. The really interesting thing is we saw house prices actually start to grow pretty much back in September of 2020, and that growth has been pretty steady throughout that sort of the last 12 to 18 months, where unit prices really only started to move come August, and have seen about 10% growth already since August. So while those house prices did get a head start, the unit prices are now tracking along with the unit prices are now tracking along with that housing market. So we're seeing really good growth at the moment, both in houses and units. And like I say, in real terms, we've seen about 20% growth in house prices and about 10% in unit prices. But that 10% in unit prices really has only come in the last 3 to 4 months. So it's going to be really exciting to watch that space coming into the new year. Now, firstly, I just wanted to quickly sort of point out, when we talk average house price growth, this is for average properties across the board. Now, in some instances, property prices are up 30% in real terms, and in other instances, people overpaid a little bit back in 2018, 2019, and their prices are now just getting back to what they paid for. So each property is unique, and each property is its own little market when it does hit the market. So it really is depending what people are looking for. We're finding the real hot market at the moment is those traditional family homes, those 4-bed, 2-bath properties. We're seeing absolutely tremendous interest on them. And the other market segment we're seeing is those really cracking investment properties. So those high yielding properties, they're seeing plenty of interest from investors. And on that note, this has been a real difference between 2020 and 2021 was the amount of investors we have seen in the market. We're back to record levels of investor activity. We're seeing a lot of buyer inquiry at the moment from Melbourne and Sydney and throughout the state. So there are a lot of investors back in the market, and this is meaning that tenanted properties are achieving just as good a results as those properties that are owner occupied or those that are vacant, which is a real mix up on the last few years. But it is a good sign as we see those investors come back into the market, and I think this will lead to continued price growth moving into next year. So as a bit of a wrap up on 2021, essentially this year was one for the record books. We saw some cracking growth, we saw some really strong results for the Cairns market, and this leads me into 2022. So one of the trends that we're seeing at the moment is we've got a bit of one-way migration. Anyone living in Cairns that's wanting to move down to New South Wales, Victoria, move interstate, they are free to travel one way. And that's what we have seen in the last sort of 3 to 4 months, is people are free to move down south, but there is restrictions on people coming up from New South Wales and Victoria in regards to the current sort of COVID restrictions. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens when the borders reopen. The borders are set to open on the 17th of December, but I think we'll have a bit of a steady inflow from there. I think a lot of people will spend Christmas with their families down south. And then I believe January and February and the first quarter of next year, I think are going to be one for the absolute record books. I think once those borders reopen, we get Christmas and New Year's out of the way, I think we're going to see a lot of buyer activity and a lot of buyers, both owner occupiers and investors, flying into Cairns in the first quarter of next year and buying up property heavily. I think if you are considering selling and looking at selling in the next sort of 1 to sort of 3 or 4 years, the first quarter of next year might be the time to really consider selling. If you are looking at holding on for another 5-10 years, who knows what the market's going to do. But like I say, if you are thinking of selling in the short term, I think the first quarter of next year could be one really worth having a look at and really worth considering. as I do feel we've got a lot of bottled up buyers that haven't been able to get up here, that have been looking at buying sight unseen, which isn't everyone's cup of tea. I think they're really going to hit the ground running in the first quarter of next year, and that's going to be a really exciting time for property in Cairns, and I'm predicting some really big growth in that first quarter. And then it'll be interesting to see what happens throughout the rest of the year. Things could soften off, but that first quarter in particular is something that I'm watching with a lot of interest, as I think we've got a lot of bottled up buyers that are going to hit the ground up in Cairns. So there's a couple of big factors that I'm really excited about for next year. First and foremost, as I just mentioned, was those borders reopening, the fact that investors and owner occupiers will actually be able to get their feet on the ground, and we're really going to see the impact that has on the first quarter of next year. The other factor that I'm really interested in is population growth. I think we're in a time in Australia where there is a lot of people shifting, a lot of people realising they can work from home, and a lot of people seeing the lifestyle opportunity that these regional centres have compared to the expensive lifestyles that are Sydney and Melbourne. So I think we're going to see a big exodus from those capital cities that we've already seen in 2021, but I think that's going to be further fueled into 2022. So I think we're going to see a lot of population growth, and that's going to put a lot of pressure on both rental and sales prices. The other big factor that's worth looking at is going to be the return of tourism in Cairns. Now, before getting into real estate, I used to work on one of the tourism boats here in Cairns, and I had hundreds of friends in tourism. Over the last 18 months, I've pretty much seen the vast majority of those friends leave the tourism industry, but they've managed to get jobs in Cairns, in tourism, in health, in education. Now, as those tourism jobs start firing back up and we start seeing those droves of tourists coming back to visit Cairns, it's going to be interesting to see where those workers come from. I think there is going to be a massive staff shortage, and this might likely lead to wage increases, but it's ultimately going to lead to some really increased pressure on the housing market, and I think in particular on the rental market as those jobs come available. And as we see that population growth, I think we're really going to see a lot of pressure on the Cairns rental market, as there is such low supply, and already people are really struggling to secure rental properties. So once tourism returns, once those jobs return with that, where those people are going to live is going to be an interesting problem, but a good problem for those people investing in Cairns already. Now, one big concern a lot of buyers are raising with me at the moment is the likelihood of high interest rates moving into 2022. Now, this is an interesting one. Obviously, inflation is an issue and something to be concerned about. And obviously, interest rates, there's a lot of people predicting we will see interest rate rises towards the end of 2022. But the banks are already factoring this in. Not that long ago, there was owner-occupied fixed rates below 2%. And now these have quickly moved up to around that 2.5% mark. So we've already seen interest rates rise by 0.5%, 0.5%. Even though the Reserve Bank of Australia hasn't changed interest rates at all. So the banks have already factored in that the official interest rates will rise, and we're already seeing those getting passed on to the consumer. So I don't think we're going to see interest rates rise by a huge margin, and I think the banks are already factoring this in and passing it along to the consumer already, and it doesn't seem to be putting a dampener onto the market. If anything, I think it will help people see value in Cairns, is because it is such an affordable market. There's still really good quality homes available between sort of the 400 to 600,000 mark, where if you look at other cities and major hubs throughout Australia, you're lucky to get something under $1 million. So the fact that our market is so affordable will certainly be work in our favour moving into 2022. And I think it's going to be a big reason why people will consider Cairns as a destination, both as an investment and somewhere to live. So there you have it. That's a bit of a prediction and a bit of my thoughts moving into 2022. Overall, I'm very bullish on the Cairns market. I can't see things softening either on the rental side or on the sales side. I think there's just too much momentum in our favour and too many positives about the Cairns region at the minute. Now, this is probably going to be my last video for the year, so I just wanted to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a fantastic New Year. I hope that 2022 is an absolutely fantastic year for you and your family, and that you're extremely successful in whatever path you decide to take moving into the new year.